You done woke him up now.
That's him. That's the thing that killed my friend.
Goddamn Scarecrow?
It's not a scarecrow. It moves.
Nothing out there is what it seems.
We are talking Night Harvest. This is a 2024 movie from director-producer Charlie Steeds. Steeds has actually done a number of movies I have reviewed here on the channel. He teams up with his star from his previous movie Death Ranch, Faith McCoy, in this kind of killer Scarecrow movie. So the story takes place in the 1970s, where we have a group of people, 5 people in total, and they are going on a vacation, or at least most of them think so, but in actual fact a couple of them are on the run from the police because of a seemingly accident involving fire, as one of these individuals actually has pyrokinesis powers, like fire starter, the ability to kind of cause fires and things. They end up kind of coming across the police and have to kind of go on the run. They break down near this kind of farm, which just happens to have another supernatural entity that is around this area in the form of this kind of crazed serial killer who's been resurrected as a kind of a scarecrow with a kind of pumpkin for a head. And now these forces will clash. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, let's discuss. So Charlie Steeds' work, I've enjoyed some of it, but he's been somewhat mixed recently. How does this one compare? Well, you know, I do think this one has a little bit more of an enjoyability factor than some of his more recent efforts, I would say. This is more of a straight kind of old school slasher movie to a degree. One thing that this movie does benefit from, I think, is, you know, some pretty good cinematography. This kind of old cabin in the woods and these kind of misty sort of forest and things and then surrounding area with this kind of scarecrow guy roaming around. We get a sequence in this with his cornfields. All looks pretty spooky, and I think a scarecrow is intrinsically kind of quite a eerie kind of horror character, so I think he's quite good. Plus the actual scarecrow character design himself, this kind of emaciated sort of pumpkin on this guy's head, looks pretty freaky, and I think is actually kind of quite, you know, quite cool looking. I think a good idea here is to have 2 supernatural beings kind of facing off against each other, but with obviously different sides of the morality sort of scale here, and completely different as well. It's not like one's a mirror image of each other. So that's pretty an interesting idea and somewhat original to this film, I have to say. Normally it's like, you know, a paranormal menace is going around killing a bunch of regular humans, but here we have, you know, a human who has his own sort of supernatural powers. So I think it gives an interesting kind of spin here. If you enjoyed the Death Ranch movie, as I say, it has Faith McCoy from that film. It has a similar vibe. It's, you know, Steeds is a British director, but here it's you know, everyone is you know, all American characters and things like that. So it has more of that sort of feel to it. That's Death Ranch. Plus, it's kind of again, it's a period piece taking place in the 70s and things. Although it doesn't really notice too much, to be honest. There's nothing really massively 70s about it, I have to say. There are a couple of kind of fairly good sort of kill sequences here. Nothing too extravagant, but, you know, reasonable for a kind of a low budget kind of horror movie. So, and it's, you know, it's a relatively kind of well paced film at the end of the day. And I think the cast here are sometimes actually quite funny. There's a character here, one of the supporting characters, one of the friends that are on this RV, actually a pretty funny character with some kind of quite amusing lines, I have to say. Let's talk about now what doesn't work. So I think let's talk about the acting. Now, I don't think the verbal acting was bad at all. I actually think the line delivery here was a little bit overcooked, but it's a B-movie horror film. It's what you'd expect from this type of film. But what I did think, and maybe this was down to the direction more so than the acting, I think the reactions to things just seemed like a little bit silly to me. There's more than one occasion where a character sort of falls down, doesn't really hurt themselves, but just on the floor, and this Scarecrow character is sort of walking towards them with the intention of killing them, and they just kind of stay there. They don't run away. It's not that their path isn't blocked, and there's just like these sort of sequences like that, and like just general reactions to things. I have to say was a little bit kind of muted and understated at times, and just downright sort of bizarre at others. So I have to say I think the acting is a little bit of a strange one, because the dialogue sequences, that's, you know, they're good enough, but yeah, some of these kind of the way the characters react and then kind of the actions that they're doing in certain sequences, to me seemed really bizarre and sort of you know, basic and silly and contrived in some instances. So there's that. The film does have a very low budget feel. So the fire powers that this guy has, you know, it's just something like, some of the times like a cut and then something's on fire. Or there's something in the foreground which is on fire and there's someone in the background going, ah, you know, something like that. So it's not especially well realised on screen, I have to say. It does look very low budget. I actually think the fire powers here almost make the film look more a lower budget than if it hadn't had it at all. I think the depictions of these kind of pyrotechnic supernatural elements, you know, I mean, it's relatively obvious when you have a guy who is has fire powers versus a living Scarecrow. You know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going to happen, does it? But so that in itself is kind of like, well, we know that's, even when I read the thing, I thought, well, that's clearly, you know, you can kind of tell what's going to happen in this movie. But then the way this movie depicts them on screen, I just don't think was, I don't know, it just didn't look very good. I mean, Steve is an experienced director, and his film's very low budget, but this came across as particularly low budget looking in those those aspects, to be honest. Despite it having a couple of reasonable kill scenes, the movie isn't as bloody as I think it maybe could have been. You know, there's a couple of reasonable shots here, but I think it could have stood to be a little bit more on the gruesome side, I would say, because it's a gruesome idea, but it's not particularly sort of gruesome on screen. And ultimately, it's a very predictable film in regards to its kind of plot. I mean, like I said, just when you read the two-line synopsis, you can kind of figure out what's going to happen sort of straight away. And then, as I say, some of the acting here, I think, is, especially from our kind of old man character, it's a little bit on the hammy side. It's okay, I think, for a B movie, but, you know, if we're being critical here, it's a little bit hammy. So, overall, this is a mildly diverting film. I don't think it's a bad film. I think it's an enjoyable film for like a one-time watch. But it's certainly not up there with the relatively small amount of very good Scarecrow movies for me. It ends up being somewhat of an average film. So as such, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.